Welcome to SEO.
Conspiracy.com.
Beautiful.
One day, after a year of this, on the very last episode, I'll get that slick. Sorry.
SEO conspiracy.com. I don't know how it came out. It's this flow, actually. It's just like,
Okay.
whatever. Anyway, we have a very interesting topic today because you are most definitely in a unique position. You went into the matrix. You saw things that no other SEO on the planet saw.
Yes. Okay. Let's see if I saw anything or whether it was just FUD. But anyway,
Yes, because I have a sense that people don't. I know it from working with Qwant.com. How big is the web? How big is Google? Can we get a sense of how huge that is?
It's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, I think it starts that the answering that question starts with how do you want to measure it? Because the logical thing for SEOs to measure it is how many pages on the web, and if I ever had, I said at the end of the last series, I've bought howbigistheweb.com. I've owned that domain for ages. And what I wanted to do was do a quick API call into to Mojeek. So Mojeek says that the web currently is 9322105545648 pages long. So, you can sit there and say, okay, well, that's what that is, and it's racking all those up. Actually, it's found a whole load more than that. But anyway, let's go for, something like 10 trillion or something. But the truth of the matter is that if you measure in pages, the answer is very much infinite. So two ways in which that happens, or a common way in which that happens, is if a URL has a timestamp in it, for example. That's entirely possible. You could just have a page that says, right, what is the time at, and then it's got the timestamp in the URL. Well, that means that every time you refresh that page, or every time you call that page, or every time you that's creating a lot of URLs. And then you can then have a page that says, right, here's a page that loads. Click this again, and I'm going to change the URL by 1 digit. So it's a link to itself, self-referencing, but it's creating an infinite number of URLs. And they sound like they're sort of just manipulating the web, but there are plenty of occasions where that situation occurs. You could be ordering any number of quantities of something. So you could sit there and say, right, there's a button on here that says add another to my basket, and then a crawler would then sit there and see that as another link, and then basically it carries on adding a number every single time to the link. So you can't measure the web in terms of links unless you're going to sit there and say the answer is infinite. So then the problem becomes, then that's a problem for crawlers, because they don't know whether to crawl a new link or a new link they've never seen before, or an old one, and it becomes a resource issue. So what you could do is then go back and say, well, okay, we're going to measure it in terms of hard drives that we're using to store all this information, and maybe you could use that. But of course, that's not so straightforward either, because your hard drive, your solid state hard drive will be a very different concept to an older style hard drive, and they're going to have different amounts of stuff on there, and there's going to be huge amounts of duplication in that situation as well. So the stuff is going to be duplicated all over the place. So that's not a really good thing. Or you could sit there and say, well, how many miles of data center has Google got? But then a lot of that stuff that they're using in there is not the web. It's sound files, or it's video files, or it's things that we wouldn't associate necessarily with the internet, or a backup of itself. So therein lies the problem. I suppose people want to put it in terms of petabytes and stuff. In which case, well, it's in the petabytes, but
it's big, very big.
Yeah. I think what is interesting though is that the way that Google indexes it all most SEOs think that there is, even for the core stuff. So forget the pictures and the YouTube and the news indexes and stuff like that.
It's different.
Just the core index. I just said it then. The core index. I think most SEOs don't understand that it's not a core index. It's a lot of it's hundreds of what they call shards in Google of indexes. So what they do is when they take your page, then they will store it randomly in one of hundreds of shards. And those shards are basically one computer. So the index is only as big as one computer. And we're talking like a normal computer. We're not talking like a quantum computer, something pretty much like we'd see on our own desks. So they'll just sit there and say, right, I'm going to take all of your pages and randomly put them across different shards. They're not going to be stored on the same shard because they're going to be able to then, when Google does its query, it can then say, Google's indexes, hundreds of them, all shards, find me the best page for this query here. And then all of those different indexes can poll back to the central machine, and then it can take the right one. And that has two really good things. Firstly, it speeds up Google, because they can, after a point, trying to have one index of every page on the internet won't scale, because you've then got to have a processor that goes through every single page to bring it up. Much better to have hundreds of them and then come back with you've only got to go through a much smaller amount. So it's at scale, it's a lot faster. I'm sure if you only got a 20-page website, it'd be a stupid thing to do. But for Google, it's much faster. The second thing that happens there is that they can then use algorithms and test algorithms on individual shards or sets of shards. So you can find that your page suddenly disappears off the web and think, oh my God, what have I done? Just this page has gone off my site. I can't see it anywhere. It used to rank number 2 for this phrase over here, and now I can't see it. It could be just an algorithm that they're testing on one shard to see whether the results that come back from that shard are better or worse than the rest of the system. So it may only be there for an hour or two, and then it may all pop back up again. But I think that how big is the web? It's probably, if I could, I'd say how many shards are Google using right now, and that would be what I would like to know. And I think it's Paul Ha is a guy that talked at Google Webmaster Conference in 2019, I think, in the States, and he's got a video up on YouTube somewhere. It's a bit hard to find, but his name's Paul Ha, H-A-A-H-R, and he talks about shards, and it's very, very interesting to watch. I think it's a great video, and he says there we got hundreds. So so I'm sitting there thinking 300. I don't know why I'm thinking 300, but anyway, it's hundreds of hard drives, and basically I want to know how many hard drives, and that's how big the web is in my head. That's how big the web is. About 300 hard drives.
Well, we can take it the other way also. We know, at least Google says, that every day they catch 25 billion pages and 90 billion links. Spam page and spam links. So that's already huge. And we also know that pretty much 90% of the web is crap.
Supplemental. You're being very, very,
very generous.
Very generous there with saying it's only 90.
But there's the supplemental index and the principal index. So there's definitely a huge majority of the content on the web that is not interesting. Even the number of queries. I don't know if it's true, but what I heard is it's pretty much 50,000 queries that represents most of the needs, everyday needs of regular folks.
Okay, well, I don't know about queries, but I tell you something very interesting for me is that if you turn the internet upside down. Instead of thinking about the world's information in terms of pages on the internet or files or things like that, and you think about it in terms of entries in a encyclopedia. So basically, it changes the whole maths massively, because there are not billions, whilst there's trillions of web pages, there's only, say, billions of things, actual things that people care about. It's probably a couple of 100,000, and you've probably got a lot of them. But certainly, it's hundreds of millions of ideas or concepts. Pretty much makes up everything that we as human beings care about or know about, and so it takes a problem, and this is why I think they've moved to semantic search and a knowledge graph, is because a knowledge graph only has to have billions of records, whereas a graph of every page on the internet has to have thousands and thousands of trillions, or many trillions of records. So the database size, or the number of records in the database, goes down massively. And also now you're talking about, okay, let's say it's a topic like, I don't know, Tottenham Hotspur. Well, okay, you can still have opinions on Tottenham Hotspur. You can have all sorts of facets connected to them and all the players and things of them. But it starts from Tottenham Hotspur. Now we can start seeing what other people are saying about different angles of Tottenham Hotspur, and it becomes much smaller than saying, right, I need every page about Tottenham Hotspur. Well, there you've already got thousands and thousands of records instead of one about Tottenham Hotspur. So it's a more efficient way of storing information in ideas and topics than it is in storing it in all of the people on the planet, just creating millions and millions more pages every day and repeating the same information. The information doesn't change. Exactly. It's just that more and more people are writing about the same information most of the time.
So it's also a problem when they want to, for example, let's go back to Qwant.com. And we've talked about it. It was an old podcast. It was at the beginning of Qwant. And I say, hey, they're going to start a search engine. They're going to crawl the web. And you are like, wow, good luck, guys. And Mojeek, also the English search engine, is also crawling the web. And they come into a dead end, meaning they can't even with the random surfer or the reasonable surfer, even with the same technology, it's growing so fast, it's so big that starting over now is a bit difficult. And I wonder if the problem with the mobile index, which was supposed to come out now and is postponed until next year, and then they don't even have a definite date, has also something to do with the fact that the web is so big and it's growing so fast that
it's entirely possible. I mean, so Majestic's currently crawling. I put it up here, but yeah, I mean, we're doing a really big.
But if you had to start Majestic today.
Yeah. I mean, Majestic's been crawling for a decade now, and more. So yeah, it's got a lot of information, and to try and collect it all again is a very difficult thing to do. And then it changes as well. So Qwant and Mojeek have to make a different distinction to more established databases, because their priority has to be to crawl stuff they've never seen before, to try and build up the amount of data. But of course, that means that you're crawling less the amount of the pages that are changing every day. So, and until you've got a calculation that can tell you whether a page is changing its content or whether it's got value to be worth recrawled, which requires something like a flow metric or a page rank or something, you can't then reprioritize your crawler. You've just got to go for everything and try and get it all in. And that's a lot of crawling. That's an awful lot of crawling. And either they're not showing their hand, or they're not crawling anywhere near as fast as Majestic or Google at the moment. Because if you look in the raw logs, for most sites, it drops off very, very quickly. Usually Google's at the top, Ahrefs and Mojeek are pretty much numbers 2 and 3. Bing is actually crawling less and less because they're trying to do things in a slightly different way. And then Baidu and Yandex are coming down. And typically when I look at them, it's that kind of order. After Google, Mojeek and Ahrefs are probably the 2 biggest crawlers on the internet. SEMrush as well sometimes as well.
Yeah, I don't think Yandex is crawling very fast. Well, SEMrush has a secret. I don't know if I can say it. Well, I can say it. Well, you know the secret?
I'm not saying anything.
If you go on archive.org and you look at SEMrush 2010, you look at the clients list. I'm on there, like one of the first 50 clients. So I know what does SEMrush come from. And you know the plugin SEO Quake?
Yeah, of course. Well, that's where it started. So SEO Quake was preceded SEMrush for sure. Yeah.
It swallows a lot of data. SEO Quake plugin, a lot. But anyways, I wanted to get into that discussion because I have a feeling, and I'm sure you must have you are a nice guy, so you're not going to rub it into people's faces. But when you hear SEOs talking about on a micro level about their queries, about their website, they have no clue from an engineer point of view on the massive scale of building a search engine, a crawler, and organizing the web.
There is certainly a there's a bias that we all get, and including you and me. We must get it as well. But we are interested in our own sites, and so we're looking at a very minute level on our own sites. But of course, that's not the way that the system's being built. The system's not being built for the spammers and for the there'll be algorithms put in there to try and protect. But you're right. When it comes to scale, some things have to be written in a very, very specific way to be able to scale. And thinking about individual sites becomes very, very small fry until it becomes a problem with something like fake news suddenly becomes a problem for an election, for example. And so there is this tendency for people to think things will carry on going in the same kind of way. And I would imagine that the engineers at Google, may think, the world, we can predict the world now, we can see the world here. And so we know what's happening. And then all of a sudden something comes along like fake news, or something comes along like a new technology, and everything goes up in the air again and starts changing. So it's a black swan moment. It's my book of the day is Black Swan, which is about it's really about the fact that the world can change overnight. Google is building and incrementally building a system to try and get better and better and better and better. But the underlying rules might change overnight. He uses the example of a turkey who thinks that every morning he's getting fed by a human being, and he's reinforced every day that this human being is really a nice guy because comes in and feeds the turkey every single day, and then on the 1,000th day gets his head cut off and he gets put on the Thanksgiving table. That is a black swan moment for the turkey. He had no idea it was coming.
Oh, I love it. Love the concept.
And it can happen to all to us. It can happen to us all. True. And it happens in society much more than we think. And it'll happen to Google. But until it happens, they don't know what to do. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what's going to come around the corner.
You can always just look back, not in front.
Yeah,
and it's also very interesting when you follow the big tech hearing, because those guys are the master of the world, master of this virtual world, the internet, the web.
Yeah.
But they got a little bit slapped by DOJ, Department of Justice, and say, hey, you guys are Americans, okay? It's freestyle, it's capitalism, until it's not anymore. And I remember the introduction from the chairman who said, if a company starts doing harms to customers and competitors, to people, and we have no alternative, then it's a problem, and we have to take care of it. And if it's not legal, it's allowed, I guess. That's capitalism, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we'll see what happens. But the party could be over overnight.
Overnight. Absolutely. Yeah, I did a blog post once years ago. It was a mythical idea that something had broken in Google, and all of a sudden it stopped working. Do you remember the Alta Vista? It happened to Alta Vista.
Yeah.
They had their Black Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever it was. They had this day where something broke in Alta Vista's algorithm, and it was 2001, 2002, something like that, and it just never worked the same again. They never managed to fix it, and it was almost literally somebody hadn't pressed the right button, or they put out an update that was unable to recover from,
so many stories on the web about websites that just remember how dig.com, they redid the website and nobody liked it, it just died. Or how Flickr died the day Instagram came out, because Flickr was never able to build a proper mobile app.
MySpace. How come MySpace never survived and Facebook thrived? It's incredible, isn't it?
Now the question I'm asking is, it's too early. It's only 20 years old, but in fashion, old brands come back. Like Fila. My 9-year-old daughter was asking for Fila.
Clothing, Fila the clothing.
Yeah. So I mean, that was like the 80s, right? And it came back. I'm wondering if those old brands from the internet one day will be trendy again. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. Well, Reddit seems to have had a bit of a revival. It doesn't seem to have gone anywhere, and that seems to have kept its audience.
Reddit is the homepage of the internet, because if they could remove every single website of the web and just keep Reddit, and it's fine. You can find everything you want and talk about anything. It's the homepage of the internet. That's definitely a weird place where it's been there forever. Everything starts there. Everything comes out of there. But interesting.
I'm scared to go into Reddit. I find it a scary place because I've always got a brand head on. Reddit users hate me. If I say anything, they'll kill me before I've woken up in the morning. So leave that to other people.
Yeah. It's definitely strange place. Don't go on Reddit if you're not ready to take it in the face. It comes out of nowhere.
Absolutely. And the only place where there has got to be Wikipedia editors. So I've got, they're just a law unto themselves.
Oh, you have 4chan, all those places. But it's true that Reddit has had a big revival, and it's stronger than ever, while others disappear, never come back. And you have some weird websites that still carry on when nobody even knows if they're still useful, like Twitter. Okay.
Yeah.
Twitter is a mystery. It's just so random, so weird. Real people don't use it, don't understand it.
Yeah, just SEOs and journalists seem to be the two.
Definitely. And other places, but the thing is also, we just talked about the web and we are overlapping into internet, because that's also something that people are mistaken about, that the web is just a part of the internet.
Yeah.
And you have different protocols, you have different
of course, and the second biggest search engine on the planet is YouTube. So when you go to the original question, how big is the web? Well, are you including YouTube? Because that more than doubles it.
And then how big is the internet? Then and there are so many secret things on the internet as well that
we
we don't even know are there. So because
yeah, it's big. And so I go back for it's infinite. It's infinite, and it's carrying on growing. Obviously, if it's infinite, it can't be carrying on growing, which is kind of weird.
And there was some talk about the Apple search engine. They've been working on the search engine for at least 10 years. Apple.
Yeah.
We might do a video on that because. But
we might have to wait until it comes out. But it's gonna be interesting. I mean, they've been working at it, as you say. But I think, they're gonna at the start they will certainly launch it just within their own products, really. So they'll be trying to encourage iPhone users and Mac users and stuff to use their system, and they'll try and I would imagine blend it with your iCloud data and your personal data and stuff to make it stickier than Google stuff, and then move out from there. So they'll be talking initially to their core base rather than trying to get new users, but that will start hurting the Googles of this world.
They can keep on taking the money. I think it's 25 billion a year that Google pays to be on the default search engine. But if they just, like you said, use their search engine to have better features, Siri and Spotlight, those two features, because it works well to control the device. But then when you start to ask things that go outside, it doesn't work well. So they could totally keep it internal and still take, because some people say, they don't need the money. These type of companies want all the money, okay?
They'll never have enough money.
It's not about, they don't need, they want it all. They don't, it's not,
this is such an American style thing. I don't understand, but then, that's me. I'm happy. I'm happy. I've got to a point in life, and I suppose I still do want to make it grow and making links grow and make I still want more, but not that much. I'm okay.
In my opinion, it's about when they go public, IPO. They just when they have a quarterly report and growth at any cost. When that's when a company changes, and even if they meant good before, once they are traded on the stock market, not the same rules.
And if I'm ever on a public company, I've gone too far. I need to get out. If my companies ever get big enough to go public, I've got to get kicked out before I go there. I know. I will be a liability in a public company at a director level anyway.
It's for entrepreneurs. It's there's this game of if you go from 0 to 100, and 100 is like Jeff Bezos, okay, the guy who is able to start from scratch and go to Amazon level. Where are you? Like Elon Musk is not a 100. He's probably like a 70. Some people are not 0, they start at 4. They can take a company from 4 to 40 to 60, and then so when you know where you locate yourself in that scale of entrepreneurship, you feel better. I'm 0 to 20. I'm 0 to 20. Honestly, after 20 people, you instead of talking about product or ideas or innovation and stuff, you're talking about lawyers and accountants and I'm the same. And tax people, So I'm the same. I'm good. All good. No need to get bigger. But anyway, no need to get bigger ourselves. But the web is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But let's finish this because we have another very good topic next time.
What are we talking about next time, Laurent?
Well, we already talked about the new boss, who is the boss at Google, but guess what?
Oh, Ben Gomez. He's not there anymore, no.
Ben Gomez and Jeff Dean, Ben Gomez is still kind of there, but definitely there's a new boss at Google, a big one, and let's talk about it next time.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
See you then. Bye.